America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please remain standing. I'd like to do a moment of silence for the students that were shot today. Thank you. This time, could Josh Rozak come up? He's going to lead us in prayer. He's the Bedford Alliance Church. Just make sure the mic's on, Josh, the little green button.
Is it working? Okay.
Yeah, there we go.
Let us pray. Father, thank you for today. Thank you that we can all meet here in this building. Thank you that there is freedom in this country, that there's freedom in this township. Father, thank you for sending your Son to earth so there could be freedom in him. I just pray that all of the discussion today and the decisions made from today and in the future will glorify you in all things that we do. Pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. Okay, first we have a public hearing. I look for a motion to open the public hearing. It's a request for approval of a resolution to establish the Mildred Avenue Public Road Maintenance District. We have a motion to open the public hearing.
Motion to open the public hearing.
Motion, supported, discussion. Seeing none, could you call the roll, please?
Mr. Clemens?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Ms. Tinneberry? Aye. Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Mr. Frederick?
Aye.
Hirschberger votes aye. Mr. Peroni?
Aye, the motion's passed. At this time, if you'd like to come forward and speak on the resolution, now would be the time to do that. Okay, seeing none, I look for a motion to close the public hearing.
Make a motion to close the public hearing.
Second.
Motion supported by Mr. Steiner. Discussion? Seeing none, could you please call the roll?
Mr. Clemens?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Frederick?
Aye.
Ms. Tinneberry? Aye. Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Hirschberger votes aye. Mr. Peroni?
Aye, and the motion passed 7-0. Okay, at this time, we could have discussion amongst board members.
Okay, this is the first public hearing for Mildred Avenue Road Improvement Special Assessment District. At this time, I have 52%, that's 19 signatures, 55% of the land area. There will be a second public hearing that will approve the amount, but right now that amount is $5,200 per parcel, and we can finance that over 10 years, but that'll come at our second public hearing. So I'd like to make a motion that we approve the Mildred Avenue Road Special Assessment District as presented.
Support.
Okay, motion supported by Ms. Tinneberry. Discussion? Seeing none, could you call the roll, please?
Hirschberger votes aye. Ms. Tinneberry?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Frederick?
Aye.
Mr. Clemens?
Aye.
Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Mr. Peroni?
Aye, and the motion passed 7-0. Okay, number 2, approval of the agenda. I'd like to pull C and B off due to the fact that they are not done. So they're planned to be on the next agenda. And I would like to move Shepherd to 4A. That would be 8E. We'll move that to 4A and then have, sorry, Tim, you got moved down one. So I look for a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda with the noted changes per Supervisor Peroni.
Second.
Okay, motion supported. Discussion? Okay, seeing none, could you call the roll, please?
Mr. Clemens?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Ms. Tinneberry?
Aye.
Mr. Frederick?
Aye.
Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Hirschberger votes aye. Mr. Peroni?
Aye, and the motion passed 7-0. Okay, item 3 is the consent agenda. The agenda committee reports. The committee recommends to the full board to approve and place on file the minutes of the March 6, 2018 regular meeting of the Bedford Township Board. B, the committee recommends to the full board to accept and place on file the general savings, pooled funds, and CD reports from the treasurer. C, the committee recommends to the full board to approve and place on file the revenue, expense report, and balance sheet for the period ending February 28, 2018.
Motion to approve the consent agenda.
Support.
Motion supported by Mr. Clements. Discussion? Seeing none, could you call the roll, please?
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Clemens?
Aye.
Ms. Tinneberry?
Aye.
Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Mr. Frederick?
Aye.
Hirschberger votes aye. Mr. Prony?
Aye, and the motion passed 7-0.
Can I interrupt?
Oh, yep, go ahead.
If you're here from Mildred Road Special Assessment District, I just want to make sure that you signed in the sign-in sheets, and if you haven't, just please sign them before you leave.
Okay, item 4A is a request for approval of the resolution to support House Bill 5517. We have State Representative Jason Shepard here today. This is on here just to show support for this bill. We think it's very important, and we wanted to show our support to what you're putting. So if you want to explain it a little bit,
Yeah.
feel free.
Well, thank you. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your consideration in this. Basically, what this package of bills does is it would actually take our current auto insurance system and mirror it to Ohio, which would cut our rates in about half. This is something I've been working on for the past 3 years that I've been in the state legislature here and representing Bedford Township and the other areas of the 56th. And we know that the high cost of auto insurance is something that hits all of us. And we have tried many ways and things to try to adjust systems that we have, and it's always come up short. This bill package is actually something that's not been put out before in the legislature. It's something that would actually change the entire system that we currently know it as. And the reason for it is because as we looked into it and researched it, the states, there's only 12 states that actually have insurance like we do, and we're the only state that has insurance like we have when it comes to unlimited coverages and the high cost. So as we've seen states like Florida look to make this move, Colorado already made this move back to similar to what is in the state of Ohio, and Indiana and Wisconsin, which are all our border states. I felt it was time for us to have a very serious discussion. Right now, it's in the insurance committee. We're working through the committee members, and hopefully we'll have the votes to get it out of committee and on the House floor over the next few weeks. And at that point, the debate will begin. So I'd like to say I appreciate your willingness to help support this, to try to not only make a difference in the state of Michigan, but make a difference in the people that live here and their pocketbooks.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. If the board would like, I can read the resolution, or
Could I just
Ms. Finneberg?
What's the opposition? I mean, who opposes this besides insurance companies?
Insurance companies actually don't. It's the biggest fight that we have are with hospitals and with brain injury clinics and the like. Insurance companies have been pushing no-fault reform for a while. The current system that we have today puts in place no fee structures. So when you get into an auto accident, let's say you break your leg, Blue Cross may reimburse you, say, at $800, may reimburse the hospital $800 or $1,100 for an x-ray. If you're in an auto accident, it's about $4,000 to $5,000 for the same x-ray. We have tried several attempts to make changes to it, and at the end of the day, it's one of these things where we feel that we have to make a big, bold push here. We have to do something to lower the cost. We are the highest in the country, and that's a huge problem for us.
Is there opposition with your colleagues?
Yeah, both caucuses obviously have oppositions based upon whatever their district makeup is. But I will say this type of plan that we're trying to implement here is something that they've not actually had to digest in the past, I guess you could say that. So some of the old arguments of some of the old ideas kind of get thrown out the window. And this is something that we'd like to see done so that we can actually start somewhere and do it right. Because as you know, there are people here in our own communities that will register vehicles across the state line to save money. So we need to do something to help that.
Thank you.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay. Well, hey, sir, this is, hey, sir, sir, you could do a public comment. Thank you. So at this time, I look for a motion to support the resolution.
Mr. Supervisor Prody, I make a motion that our board affirms and supports the presented resolution to support House Representative Jason Shepard in the bill he introduced, House Bill 5517, to eliminate Michigan's automobile no-fault insurance system.
Second.
Okay, motion supported. Discussion? I would just like to say thank you. I know it's a lot of work to bring bills like this forward.
It is.
But I just wanted to say thank you. Mr. Frederick?
Yeah, before you leave, is Mayor Duggan still pushing the Detroit insurance?
No, actually, the mayor and I have met several times, and this would be something he would support if we can get it to moving on the House floor. He would help with Wayne County delegation on that front.
Thank you.
Yep.
All right. Could you call the roll, please?
Mr. Clemens?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Frederick?
Aye.
Ms. Tinnevery?
Aye.
Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Hirschberger votes aye. Mr. Peroni?
Aye, and the motion passed 7-0. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yep.
And you can thank Mr. Clemens. He had the good idea to push you up all the way up there, so. Okay, next on the list is for B, presentation by Tim Sergel, Monroe County Drain Commission, Pat McGow, bond attorney from Miller Canfield, and Carrie Blanchett, financial advisor from PFM on the proposed financing through Monroe County for improvements to the township sewage disposal system, and request for approval of the resolution requesting county assistance on the sewage disposal system project, request for approval of the Act 342 contract between the county and Bedford Township, request for approval of the resolution approving Act 342 contract and publication of notice. Mr. Francis has been working diligently on this for a while with the Drain Commission's office, so I'm going to hand it over to you, and then,
Okay.
you know, whatever.
Well, we've been talking about this for over a year. We received a grant of $900 and some odd thousand a year or so to go to study what the needs are, and that confirmed what the needs are, and we're moving along. This is the project to make substantial upgrades to our sewer system that we hope will last 35 years or more and preserve what we have. So I'd like Mr. Sergo and Mr. McGow to present an explanation of what we need to do tonight.
Tim Sergo, representing Dave Thompson, Monroe County Drain Commissioner. I'm the Deputy Commissioner. I am also a resident of this township. Yes, that is correct. We've been working for quite a long time now to make improvements to the treatment plant, the Bedford treatment plant, that is, and the improvements that are being made on parts of the plant that were originally built in 1969 have become outdated and dilapidated, and we've identified over $11 million worth of items that need to be fixed and upgraded. We went through a series of processes with the state, including getting a SAW grant for an I&I study, that's inflow and infiltration, and that made us eligible for SRF funding. We have received, we processed all the correct paperwork, and now we've received a notification that that funding is available, and we're eligible for over $11 million in a low-interest loan of 2% for 20 years. Say if I said anything wrong so far. And as a result, to get the money, which the closing date with the state is June 22nd, we have to have these resolutions and the rest of the paperwork completed. And we are taking bids on the project at April 24th. We just finalized the plans today, and we hope to have dirt flying by August the 1st. The project will be completed in late fall of 2019. So the treatment plant will have a lot of construction going on for the next almost 2 years, and we'll move forward from there.
Very cool.
So
Any questions?
I'm going to turn it over to Pat McGow, and he is our bond counsel. And we also have Carrie Blanchett, financial advisor from PFM, and that is a requirement of part in getting this money from the state.
Okay, thank you.
Great, good evening. So as Tim mentioned, my name is Pat McGow. I'm an attorney. I work on bond financings. In this project, I'm working on behalf of the Monroe County Drain Commissioner's Office because the Monroe County is actually going to be the issuer of the bonds that will pay to finance this project. As Mr. Francis indicated, really this started over a year ago when the application was made to the state to participate in what's called the State Revolving Fund Program. This is a state program that uses federal grant dollars to subsidize sewer projects. And so the application was made, some grants were received, and you were approved to be in the program meeting the certain timelines and requirements that the state has for these types of projects. This is the same process that a lot of the water and sewer projects in Monroe County have gone through. This particular financing is being done by the county in the same way that it was back in 2010, the last time there were a number of improvements out at the treatment plant, and even back in 2005. So essentially, The project has been going through design. It's on track to go through the schedule that Tim mentioned, which would be to essentially receive construction bids this spring and close on a financing potentially in June with the state. The county has issued the bonds for this project in the past, and the township then enters into a contract with the county to agree to pay it back. And that's been done through rates and charges to users of the system. So essentially, the sewer bills and the rates generated from the sewer bills is what pays back the debt. The county is involved because this particular program through the state requires a certain investment grade rating. The county's done the projects in the past, and a lot of the projects that have been done in the county have been financed that way through the Drain Commissioner's office with the approval of the County Board of Commissioners. So what you have before you tonight for approval is essentially the financing documents that allow us to move forward on the process with the financing. If approved by the Township Board tonight, you're essentially being asked to approve a resolution which requests the financing assistance of the county. And then the second document is a resolution which would approve that contract between the township and the county. And essentially what the contract says is that the county will issue the bonds, the debt, in an amount not to exceed $12 million, and the township will pay that back and pledge its full faith and credit for repayment of that debt. The contracts, the construction contract would be coordinated through the Drain Commissioner's office as the past projects have been done. There is a resolution that's before you tonight for that, and there's a form of a notice that says that these bonds can be issued by the county unless a referendum petition is signed and submitted within 45 days by 10% of the registered electors. So essentially, that's the process at the township. If approved by you, then this also needs to go for approval to the County Board of Commissioners, and we're targeting a meeting sometime later in April for that process, for the county to consider a resolution to approve the bonds. Once all the bids are in, then the resolutions essentially delegate to the Drain Commissioner's office to coordinate receiving the construction bids, coordinating that, and finalizing the sale documents. As Tim mentioned, the interest rate has already been set. So the nice thing about this program through the state is, even though you may hear interest rates are going up, this state program essentially locks in a 2% rate for 20 years. So that's subsidized by federal funds as well. So really it's a matter of getting the construction bids in. The resolution in the contract asks for an authorization of not to exceed $12 million. Right now I think the number is less than that. It's in the $11.2 million range. We have a little bit of cushion in there. However, the actual amount of the loan is really going to be dictated by the construction bids. So once all the bids are in, the amount will be set by the state based on what the actual cost is. They do allow a small 6% contingency, but essentially that's going to be driven by what that cost is. So we have the ability to reduce it from there based on the bids, but it would not be allowed to exceed that. So that's kind of a thumbnail sketch of what we're doing right now with the project and the financing and what the resolution and the contract before you have. I'm going to stop talking and answer any questions that you may have about the financing, the project, or the process.
Ms. Tinaver?
In your letter, you stipulate that the notice must be in the Monroe Evening News. I mean, what's the law? Is it a daily paper, or can it be a paper of general circulation? Or?
So it's supposed to be a paper of general circulation within the township. Typically, the township has used the Monroe Evening News, and other townships have used that in the past. The fact that it's a daily makes it a little easier to get in and get that started.
But if we can find a cheaper paper that is general circulation in Bedford, it doesn't have to be the Monroe Evening News?
It does not have to be. You could, as a board, decide to use a different newspaper of general circulation.
Okay. I just have two more questions. You just said 20 years to pay off pay back but later on in page 8, it says the contract shall remain in force for effective a period of 40 years.
Yeah, so the statute that governs this talks about the contracts cannot exceed 40 years. The repayment is a 20-year, but we are allowed to go out as long as 40. This state program is only 20 years. So we usually provide in the contract, if for some reason there is an extension for various reasons, that usually doesn't happen, but that's why we go with what the statutory maximum is.
Okay, but
Carrie Blanchett from PFM. We actually expect that the repayment term will probably be more in the 22 years. The state allows 20 years of principal repayment because you're getting such a low cost of funds. Spreading it out over a longer time period reduces your cost, your annual cost.
Okay, but the interest won't go up after 20 years,
No.
will it? Okay.
No.
Yeah, let me just make, that's a great point. So when I talk 20 years, that's 20 annual principal payments, which, as Carrie said, that doesn't start until after the project's completed. So
Okay.
there's this construction period, and then it starts after that.
Okay. Well, you know, we're dealing with the Drain Commission, so we have to be careful. And then also on page 7, it says, after completion, the payment costs are, oh, never mind, I'm sorry, that question was answered in your, thank you, that's all I have.
Mr.
Question I
Frederick?
had is answered.
My normal question, Pat, are these documents in legally sufficient form?
Yes, I prepared them, and I believe they meet all the requirements of the statute to fulfill the requirements of the program.
Okay. And the ultimate obligation at the bottom of the totem pole is the township?
That is correct.
Thank you. I have no further questions, familiar with all this stuff.
Mr. Steiner?
Just a quick request from Mr. Sergo. You presented to us a full presentation of the system after you did all the examination and had the cameras and everything. Can you give, without, I know you don't have anything in front of you right now, but can you just give the audience and the citizens just a brief, it's like saying, okay, I took my car and they told me it's going to cost $5,000 to fix my car. Well, what are you going to fix with my $5,000? So can you just give them a synopsis of what you're doing?
Of the money that we're receiving, about most of it's going to be used at the treatment plant to refurbish the plant that was originally built in 1969. About $2 million of the funds are going to be used for manhole and mainline rehab. We have some sanitary sewers that are very deteriorated that need to be replaced and or lined. We have a lot of manholes that are actually taking in stormwater. And as you know, we don't want to treat stormwater at the treatment plant because that's very expensive. And that's one of the purposes, is to eliminate the stormwater out of the sanitary treatment process.
And that's what that test proved, the $900,000 test showed where their
Right.
faults
That was
were.
it cost a little over $1 million, and it was a 90-10 match with the state, so they paid 90 cents on the dollar for that. And so that was really a great bargain, and that was a requirement to get to this point, to get this low-interest loan. So it was a double win for all of us.
And like you said, part of the big thing was the infiltration, and we're
Yeah.
all paying to treat water that doesn't need to be treated, basically.
That's correct.
Right. And so this would eliminate.
And that uses up capacity at the plant. So when we
Correct.
eliminate the stormwater, in essence, we have more capacity, or we still have the same capacity, but we're just utilizing it in a more efficient manner.
Thank you.
I'm sure Mr. Francis has something he would like to say. No?
I do. I passed out a memo to the board members answering a question that was posed to me earlier, which was, if we borrow 11-point-something million dollars, what's that going to do with our rates? Is it going to increase the rates? The answer is no, because the rate structure that this board approved in this past December already has that built into it. So we've already covered that, and 2 financial analysis have been done on that structure and agreed with the numbers that were presented. So it will not increase the rates. The only thing that might increase the rates would be any inflation of operating costs as the years go on, but no increase for the funding of the bonds, which I think is good news. Also in that memo, we had talked earlier about using like $3 million out of reserve funds that we have on hand built up over many years in our sewer fund to pay down and borrow less. We got a great rate of 2%. We have 2 existing bonds out there right now, one from 2015 that's about 4.5% interest, and one from 2010, which is up to 6.5%. So it made a lot of sense to me, and the analysis that were done, to why not use that 2% money to pay off 4.5% and 6.5% money. So that's what I think we should propose, but that isn't on the docket tonight. That'll be presented in a recommendation from the Finance Committee at the proper time in a future board meeting. But that's the goal.
Right. What we were proposing is after the construction bids are in hand, and you know what those bids are, to come back to the board or the Finance Committee with the optimal use of that extra fund, the extra funds, because Mr. Francis is right. It makes more sense to use that money to pay down more expensive debt. The 2010 is actually a lower cost than that because those of you that are on the board or were on the board back in 2010, remember, that was a part of the federal ARA package. So you get a subsidy from the federal government, but they're also taking some of that subsidy away right now. So it's not as low as it was, but it's still a higher rate than 2%. So, taking out that debt, either all or in part, will be beneficial to you in interest cost savings and also help to reduce the spikes in the debt service.
Any more questions from board members?
One.
Mr. Frederick?
I don't know if there's a carrier, Pat. Is there a prepayment penalty on this loan? I mean, I'm assuming the state would love to have their money back early.
This loan?
On this $12 million?
Actually, you can pay it off, there's not a prepayment penalty, but you can only pay it off early with the approval of the state.
Okay.
And they generally do approve that.
Yeah, I'm assuming they'd like to have their money back quickly, lend it out again. Thank you.
Any more discussion, or you
I
guys
would
want
like
to
to
add
say one
anything?
last thing, I guess, to clarify. We plan on coming back to this board maybe July, plus or minus, maybe August, I guess. And at that time, we'll know exactly where we are financially with the plant bids. And what we're doing now is we want to pay off those 2 old bond issues with the cash on hand that we originally were going to put down on this improvement, but because we got all the money from the state, it behooves us, which we don't have to take, we want to pay off those 2 bond issues, and there's over $250,000 worth of savings. Is that correct, Carrie?
Right. Well, the cost, just using the $3 million, is just to pay down the debt was about $750,000 interest cost savings, and that's already factoring the federal subsidy. So.
So we're going to come back to this board once we have all the numbers, and maybe start with the Finance Committee, but we're going to make a recommendation that we use that money to good use and save the citizens of Bedford Township a lot of money.
I appreciate it. Thank you. Any more discussion from board members? Okay. Seeing none, I look for a motion.
Mr. Supervisor?
Three motions, don't you?
Yes.
3 motions.
I move that we approve the preliminary resolution requesting county assistance in the sewer project as presented.
Second.
Motion supported by Mr. Frederick. Discussion? Seeing none, could you call the roll, please?
Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Mr. Frederick?
Aye.
Mr. Clemens?
Aye.
Ms. Tinneberry?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Hirschberger votes aye. Mr. Peroni?
Aye, and the motion passed 7-0.
Mr. Supervisor, I have another motion that we approve the Monroe County Sewage Disposal System, Bedford Township System Number 7, Series 2018 contract as presented in the board packet.
Second.
Okay, motion is supported by Mr. Frederick. Discussion? Seeing none, could you call the roll, please?
Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Mr. Frederick?
Aye.
Ms. Tinneberry?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Clemens?
Aye.
Hirschberger votes aye. Mr. Peroni?
Aye, and the motion passed 7-0.
And then, Mr. Supervisor, there is one last motion, and that is to approve the resolution approving Act 342 contract that we just did, and to publication of the notice that's required as presented.
Second.
Okay, motion supported. Discussion? Ms. Tinneberry?
The notice that we're approving here states Monroe Evening News. I want to ask Trudy, can you put it in the press and it'd be much cheaper?
The press is cheaper, but it's not a daily, if that,
He didn't say it had to be a daily. He said a newspaper of general circulation.
It doesn't have to be a daily, it's a newspaper of
Then-
general circulation.
And that has more circulation than the Monroe Evening News in Bedford Township. The circulation is greater. It goes to every resident.
I mean, that's a decision for the board, you can
Well,
put it in.
Somebody want to add in the motion, Bedford Press?
Did Tim want something?
We will try to do that. We just have to make sure, because it doesn't publish but twice a month. We're going to have to verify it fits within the deadline, but we can make that happen as long as it fits within our deadlines.
Okay.
The clerk's office would take care of that. Do you know when it would publish next?
The Bedford Press is, I think, coming out this coming week, so it would be 2 more weeks from today.
We have our minutes published in that paper, and it's the same law that, I mean, it's not the same law, but the same wording in the law about a newspaper of general circulation. I'm just trying to save
You
money.
know, unfortunately, though, the timing issue is that
Would be the
we need that referendum period to expire before.
I think we
early-
could put in the motion, though, if it works out to go in the Bedford Press, we'll go that route. If not,
Yeah.
we'll go the other route.
I believe
Could you add
April
that in?
5th is it would be the deadline for the press, would be the next deadline.
Can somebody add that in the motion? They're good with that?
Don't you add it?
You
Oh,
good
yeah,
with that,
yeah.
Nancy?
I have no problem with it.
Oh, you don't
You want
want
to make
to?
it part
No,
of
I
the
have no
motion?
problem with it.
Oh,
I'm just a
oh.
little concerned about the timing, because isn't there a 45-day clock that starts running where, as long as that fits in the schedule, I have no problem at all with
Are
it.
you publishing it, or is Trudy?
We will coordinate with
No,
the
well, actually, yeah, they are.
with the clerk.
Okay.
Officially,
what
the
I
clerk
thought.
does. Yeah.
A lot of finger pointing going on here. Let's just make a
So-
motion already.
I would like to add the friendly amendment
Clerk's
that
office
if it works
publishes.
out to publish in the Bedford Press, that we would do that.
Okay. Okay. Do we have a support?
No, that wasn't the motion,
That
that was
wasn't
a
the mo-
friendly
okay,
amendment to his
friendly amendment.
motion.
I will support and the friendly amendment, support it,
You can't. It's Paul and Lamar.
Yeah.
yeah. I just want to show I support it.
You supported the friendly amendment, is that right? Okay. So then you call the question.
Why doesn't the clerk work with the drain commissioner to make sure that this is done in a timely manner, rather than we say it's going to be an A or B or C or D? Let the clerk take responsibility, which is her duty, to get this done.
That's what we said,
Yeah, I think that's what we just did.
yeah.
Okay. Discussion? Okay, seeing none, could you call the roll, please?
Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Mr. Frederick?
Aye.
Mr. Clemens?
Aye.
Ms. Tinnevery?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Hirschberger votes aye. Mr. Peroni?
Aye, and the motion passed 7-0. Thank you guys very much for being here.
Thank you.
Okay. Number 5, public comment. Comments limited to 2 minutes for board agenda items only. So come on up at this time.
Logan Tisdale, 1308 Brandywine Street. I know you've asked the Sheriff's Department to answer numerous questions about the contract and the quarterly invoices we have received for 2017. A huge concern for me is the other hours, which amounted to 3,478.7 hours for 2017, and the fact that they have failed to answer your question for over a month. Those hours cost the township $150,001.54, and as of this date, we have no clue what they represent. Last year, the contract deputy sheriff failed to reach the required work hours for the year and was short 1,398.25 hours of the required contract hours. We paid them as if they worked those required hours, which cost the taxpayers of this township $60,292.54, of which we received nothing except the bill. We were grossly overcharged this amount. The monthly reports that they send to the township are not the real hours worked by the contract officers. They failed to portray the true hours that are actually worked by the 10 contract officers. Is this intentional, or is this a huge clerical error? There were only 7 contract officers that worked the entire year of 2017, and there were only 3 that actually worked the required yearly hours for a contract deputy. There were 26 officers on a revised monthly summary reports that were requested earlier this year, meaning that 19 officers replaced the 3 positions of contract officers who were supposed to work every month of the year and did not. Confused? I sure am. How can you possibly keep an accurate account of the contract and its requirements with this poor system? How can you possibly figure the 35 days that the contract requires Bedford Township to pay for each deputy for sick, annual, personal leave, and training days? How can you possibly determine who are contract officers or general fund deputies who we already pay for at a cost of $1.9 million? More confused? You should be, because this is the worst-case scenario for this township. If you as township trustees can't see our dilemma and how we are used as a subsidy for the Monroe County Sheriff's budget, then hire someone to monitor this.
Logan, your time is up. Thank you for your comments. Any more comments?
Dale Track, 2842 Sanibel Lane. I'd just like to thank the board for their unanimous support of tonight of Representative Shepard's bill 5517 to eliminate no-fault insurance. You know, some people might think it's more of a symbolic vote, but I think it speaks louder than that. I think it sends a message to Lansing that the people here in Bedford, they need some relief from this. They need to see this onerous law go away. The potential financial gain from this could be quite substantial to the economy across the, statewide. So the way I look at this is Representative Shepard could go back to Lansing with this message that the representatives of Bedford Township stood up for 32,000 people and said, let's do something about this. And he can talk to his colleagues about this. And we've got the video for it as well that he'll be able to use, that this is important to the residents of Bedford, and it should be important to the residents of this state to do something that's long overdue. And as I've said before, this shouldn't be a Republican or a Democrat issue. This is a Michigan economic issue. And, those that talk the talk about being for the poor, the middle class, and the elderly, this is their chance to walk the walk. This is their chance to stand up and put some money back in the people's pockets. Particularly, when you look at some of that disposable income that could potentially go towards the needs within communities. So, thank you again.
Thank you for your comments. Any more comments from the public? Okay, seeing none, moving on to staff reports. Chief Massengill, 6A, discussion of the Fire Prevention Division.
Good evening. I've just got a couple things tonight. The first being a little bit of reorganization, a little restructuring of the Fire Prevention Division. The Fire Prevention Division being the Fire Marshal. The code calls for us to create a prevention division when we adopt the code, so we have a number of years ago. With his upcoming retirement, we would like to restructure a little bit. We do need to have a fire marshal or a fire code authority named, and I feel pretty comfortable taking over the duties of the fire code authority when he leaves, although we certainly need to keep a position of doing the fire prevention, the fire inspection, the investigations and things like that. So we'd internally posted for a fire investigator / inspector position, and we'll discuss that here shortly, but generally, the first request was asking for three things. Number one, to reassign upon his retirement the fire code authority power to the fire chief. The second would be to replace the full-time fire marshal position with a full-time fire inspector investigator position. And then the third one is, it's kind of some housekeeping as well. We have the ability within the department, we've got a couple of fire investigators that are volunteers. We have 3 or 4 fire inspectors that are volunteers. So to be able to utilize those, I would need as a fire code official or the fire marshal would the authority to appoint those volunteers as part-time inspectors or investigators as needed. So it's provided for in the fire code. It's generally just something that will help us serve the community a little better.
Okay, thank you. Any discussion from board members? Ms. Tenenberry?
You said in the same sentence, volunteers and part-time. Is part-time paid, or what do you mean, part-time volunteer, or?
It would be the volunteers, but on a part-time basis. So for instance, if the fire marshal were to take a vacation or something, there's no provision, whereas I could ask one of the other certified inspectors, hey, could you do an inspection this week? There's no real provisions that allow for that without, as the code says, the affirmation that I have the authority to appoint them.
So the ones you appoint are volunteer?
Correct.
There's no, okay.
Yeah, if I said part-time, I misspoke, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Fredericks?
I'll follow up with Ms. Tinbury's question. You have $1.7 million outstanding in equipment. Your budget's getting pretty skinny, so I'm going to support what you want to do. But I would hope that you would be watching carefully, because even though they're volunteers, when they come to work, I'm assuming you are going to pay them a salary, a fee, or something.
Correct.
Okay, so I just am giving you kind of a short warning.
Sure.
Okay, any more discussion? Okay, seeing none, I look for a motion.
Mr. Supervisor, I tried to word a motion here. It's a little lengthy, but it might accomplish what we're after. I'd like to read it.
Okay.
I move that we approve Chief Massengale's request to restructure the Fire Prevention Investigator Division within the Bedford Township Fire Department as described in the 2015 International Fire Code so as to accomplish the following. One is to formalize the appointment of Chief Adam Massengale as the fire code official and thereby affirm his authority under provisions of the 2015 International Fire Code to appoint deputy code officers, officials, inspectors, and technical officers as needed for the function of implementing administration and enforcement of provisions of the 2015 International Fire Code. Point number 2 is to assign to the fire chief the additional duties, roles, and responsibilities of fire marshal to take full effect upon the retirement of Fire Marshal Ron Whipple, which we anticipate would be in June of 2018. Point 3 is to create the full-time position of fire inspector/investigator, which will eventually replace the full-time fire marshal position. The fire marshal position will be eliminated upon the retirement of Fire Marshal Ron Whipple. And the final one is to affirm, excuse me, the fire code official has the authority to appoint volunteer inspectors and investigators and other technical officers as necessary.
Second.
Ms. Tinbury?
I apologize, but could you read number 2 again?
To assign him the additional duties, roles, and responsibilities of fire marshal.
Okay, the duties, but not as a fire marshal, because you said later on that the fire marshal position will be eliminated.
Right, but the duties are being assigned to the
Okay.
fire.
Okay, I'm sorry, I just wanted to clarify that.
Well, maybe I didn't word it.
I'm a little
Clearly.
slow.
I support.
Okay, motion supported. Mr. Clements? Discussion? Seeing none, could you call the roll, please?
Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Mr. Clemens?
Aye.
Ms. Tinneberry?
Aye.
Mr. Frederick?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Hirschberger votes aye. Mr. Peroni?
Aye, and the motion passed 7-0. Okay, 6B, recommendation for the full-time fire inspector investigator position. Chief?
Yeah, we've conducted an internal search, again, with the upcoming retirement of Fire Marshal Whipple. We had, of the 4 internal candidates, or I guess 5 internal candidates that we had had 1 that applied for the position, and I would recommend the position of the full-time fire inspector investigator be offered to Captain Doug Steinman at an annual salary of $50,000 plus benefits as described in the Township Personnel Manual. Now, in order to make for a smooth transition, and we've discussed it internally, We would like for that position to start as soon as possible so that we can make for a smooth transition with the outgoing fire marshal and incoming position. We'd like that to be seamless and so that the public doesn't notice any differences in service or in the jobs that are being performed, the inspections.
Okay. I was part of that discussion with Chief, and we thought it'd be best to give the training time. I mean, you can have all the book training you want in the world, but knowing the township and knowing the businesses and knowing the people, and kind of what he would expect, they looked at about 2 months. It would be about the time needed for training. So it's kind of the thought process behind it. You know, you have that double coverage of, you know, paying Captain Doug Steinman in an interim of the retirement, but.
And our budget, our firefighter wages budget could certainly sustain this for the period of a couple months.
And you really can't expect to train somebody on a job without paying them, so kind of goes along with it. So, discussion from board members?
Mr. Supervisor, I already called Chief Massengill before to kind of discuss this with him. I only have one concern with the recommendation, Chief, and that is the wage. And I historically have challenged wages. When Mr. Pryor was hired, I argued that the lack of experience should be considered. And I think to be fair, conversely, the amount of experience in this position I think needs to be weighed. One of the best things that I think I've done as a board member here is be a participant in the decision to hire Chief Massengill. I think we're all very happy with the direction the fire department's going in. And I think part of the long-term succession plan there, if we get a fire inspector stabilized, I think it gives that duration to the fire department. So I would put out there that I feel like that 50 is a bit low for the position. I'm also concerned that Captain Steinman could be poached from our department, given needs around the county and the area. So I would like to throw out for consideration that the board consider a base salary of $55,000 as opposed to recommendation of 50.
We discussed that a lot. You know, the recommendation obviously, you know, came from Chief. So, I mean, you want to give your thoughts on it and kind of the thought process behind it?
The recommendation was based on generally national average of a starting fire inspector across the United States. I took into consideration, slight consideration for years of service with the department, but that was basically generally where I arrived at the $50,000 number.
Okay. Mr. Steiner?
I also had conversation with Chief on this issue, and we did definitely discuss the fact of years of service, basically, if you want to call it on-the-job training day in and day out. The one thing that does impress me, and if you look at the resume that's attached, is the continuing education level, and it hasn't stopped. You can see all the way through, and Captain Steinman is continuing to go to school today for even more education. We did talk, there's a couple levels that you want him to achieve. He will achieve those probably within the next year or two, I think you said.
Yeah, the posting had required a couple of additional levels within the next 18 months to 2 years, I believe.
So he will hit those. Again, I don't expect that he wouldn't hit those based on the fact that he's continued to do all these other parts of education all along the way. So I'm inclined to sort of move along with the comments from Mr. Clements. I'd hate to see, as the word he used, see somebody poached from Bedford that is of value and has put a lot of time in and dedication to this community.
Any more, Ms. Tinneberry?
I totally agree with Mr. Clements as well, Mr. Steiner. I think the other thing that I was taking into consideration that I didn't hear from the chief is that Fire Marshal or Mr. Whipple didn't necessarily go out on calls, and Mr. Steinman has been a firefighter all these years. I'm sorry to say, Doug, but known him since he was a little kid, watch him grow in leadership and as a man, and I highly respect him. And he plans on continuing to go on calls. If he's in the office and he's not doing fire inspector things, he plans to continue, which he would not be paid as he is now. So, and we're paying $65,000 to the fire marshal now. I think $50,000 is just not enough. I totally agree. I would like to see 60, but I'll agree to 55 if that's the consensus of the board. I won't agree to 50.
Well, thank you for bringing up the additional hours. I had totally neglected to mention that, but I think that's very big, to be able to continue to have that asset from a response and a management standpoint, to have that asset in the middle of the night when responding and being at a scene is most critical, as opposed to waiting hours to get there. And ultimately, it is a net gain to the department, because currently,
Right.
Fire Marshal Whipple is making more money than when we even suggested at this
Right.
point.
Right.
Any more discussion? Mr. Fredericks?
Chief, you indicated that there's a couple more levels for him to complete.
Correct.
How long do you think it would take? I mean, I've known Doug for 20 years, so I'm sure he will devote his energies and probably leave his family behind from time to time. How long do you think it would take for him to get those completed?
The 3 levels is NFPA plans examiner level. He's already completed the schooling. He's waiting to test, I believe, for that level. The fire investigator certification is something that, generally speaking, it's going to be dependent on the classes, finding a class that's available and getting him to that course. So the Michigan State Police, I believe, runs one. The National Fire Academy runs one. So we would be looking pretty quickly at finding a course that he could get in. So certainly, I would hope within the next 6 to 8 months. And then the position that was posted recommended the Fire Inspector 2 level through the NFPA within 2 years, I believe. Well, that's a very high certification. It's something that's above and beyond, I would say, what's necessary, but it certainly would lend value for us in Bedford. So I don't think we required that, but we recommended that he seeks that certification within about 2 years. And that's yet some more schooling, so.
Well, perhaps then, in support of Mr. Clement's thoughts, you might come back to us quickly and suggest after he's completed this, he might get an increase in salary. If he completes this, gets another increase in salary, so that there's some, one, incentive for him to go forward, which I would expect him to do anyhow. Number 2, there's always a monetary award for completing this work. And so I'm wondering if in support of what you're suggesting, that we might have you come back and move him along in terms of salary when he completes 2 or 3, or however you choose to do it.
Well, I think that's what the whole point of this whole process was, where he started him. It wasn't just because that's the national average. You wanted to give opportunity to grow, right?
Yeah, it's a little above the national average. The national average would be, for a brand-new fire inspector, would be 38 to 44,000. Again, like I said, with the years of service, I thought that was, I would agree with you, that was a little bit low, considering there's been a guy that was with the department for better than 2 decades now, serving the community.
Trustee Steiner?
Yeah, Mr. Frederick, I had the same conversation with the chief also, and I think it's definitely warranted upon each level. And I think after our conversation, he's probably got it pretty close to in his back pocket of an idea what he would do when it comes to each one of those levels. So I agree, and I would like to see it proceed and come back to us with those levels and what those bumps would be.
So are you saying leave him at the 50 or start him
No,
at
no,
the
no,
55?
no. That has nothing to do with the 50 to 55. This is strictly in addition going down the road once he completes even more certifications.
It's expected that once he moves up and completes more, that he would come back. I mean, the current fire marshal is 65,000, so if you start him at 55, you still have plenty of room to move up. And we have historically brought people in, elected officials come in at the same salary as the people who are outgoing. People come in at the same salary, for certain jobs as the people who are outgoing. So to me, I'm not asking, or I guess Rick and TC aren't asking either for 65,000, but 55,000, I think, gives plenty of room to increase as he gets further certification.
Any more discussion from board members? Mr. Fredericks?
Well, one more comment, the more education he gets, the more valuable he is to another department. I don't know if he'd like to make that trip back and forth to Detroit every day or some other place, but
I can tell you he doesn't.
well, I was going to suggest he could ride with you. But I really am a little concerned about having him, as I think someone earlier said, have him poached by someone else.
He's a lifelong resident. His family's here. His wife works here in the school system. I don't think there's a chance of that.
I agree with Ms. Tinneberry. It's obvious he's dedicated to this township and this fire department. It's shown over the years. I wouldn't be concerned with that. I mean, but Chief, what do you recommend? I mean, with the discussion you're hearing here, are you?
I mean, I serve at the pleasure of the board. The budget.
Yeah, but ultimately you have a plan coming here, so.
The budget will certainly sustain whatever the board suggests tonight. I believe I'd be returning to you guys, probably asking, or I would agree that as he receives the certifications or follows through with the certifications, he certainly should be, or would be deserving to, with each certification, an increase. Without a doubt.
Mr. Supervisor, I'd like to go ahead and make a motion, so at least we can have final discussion if we need to, that we accept the recommendation for Captain Doug Steinman to be appointed full-time to the Fire Inspector Investigator position, and recommending a starting wage of $55,000 plus all other employee benefits that would be ascribed to someone in that position with Bedford Township.
I'll second.
Okay, motion is supported by Trustee Steiner. That was a close one there.
Friendly amendment.
Friendly amendment.
To be effective immediately.
Okay.
Accept.
Okay, discussion? Any more discussion? Mr. Steiner?
And then, as we said, Chief, if you would bring those levels back to us with your recommendation and the bumps, and we could get going on that. That way it's written, it's there, even though you come back and it's warranted, you've got it, it's there in writing, and it's simpler that way.
Understood.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Call the roll, please.
Mr. Clemens?
Support.
Mr.
Yes.
Steiner?
Aye.
Ms. Tinneberry?
Aye.
Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Mr. Frederick?
Aye.
Hirschberger votes aye. Mr. Peroni?
Aye, and the motion passed 7-0. Okay, 6D, discussion of the sale of the 1996 mini pumper. Chief Massinger?
Yeah, this is more just real brief discussion. A number of months ago, with the board's approval, we listed the 96 mini pumper as a, or we put it up for sale to see if we had any interest. We did not garnish a lot of interest at that time, but recently we've had some inquiries through the agent that we listed it through. So I think that we're going to continue to entertain any offers that we may have. There's nothing that's imminent, but it's that time of year where grass fires, brush fires are starting to come up. So anybody that's in the market is starting to make phone calls around. I just thought I'd bring that back in front of you folks to make sure that we were still okay to entertain offers. That's generally it.
Support it. Do we don't need a motion for this, do we?
I wouldn't think.
Okay. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Chief.
Thanks, Chief.
Okay, is there any discussion on this item anymore? We're moving on, okay. 8, under new business, A, request for approval of vouchers for payment. Ms. Hirschberger?
I'd like to make a motion that the following vouchers be approved for payment. General Fund, $263,945.51. Fire District, $59,188.01. Police Fund, $2,336.45. Park Fund, $77.34. Transit System Fund, $17,520.50. Library Fund, $5,421.70. Water Revenue Fund, $3,700. Enchanted Forest, SAD, $94,285. Indian Acres, SAD, $505.75. Mohawk Trails, SAD, $565.25. Green Hills and Other, SAD, $140,500. Barbara Lee Harmony, SAD, $38,858.75. Downtown Development Authority, $168.56. Sewer O&M Fund, $253.87. Trust and Agency Fund, $138, for a grand total of $627,464.69.
Second.
Okay, motion is supported by Mr. Francis. Discussion? Seeing none, could you call the roll, please?
Hirschberger votes aye. Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Mr. Frederick?
Aye.
Ms. Tinnevery?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Clemens?
Aye.
Mr. Peroni?
Aye, the motion passed 7-0. Okay, item 8C, request for approval of the sale of the 2000 Ford Ranger. Okay, you have paper in front of you. I'm asking the board to sell the 2000 Ford Ranger, which is no longer being used. It should be sold through the bid process. I'm asking the board to set the value for the minimum bid, which according to Kelly Blue Book Wholesale is in between $14.73 to $23.12. Retail on this truck with its low miles and good condition will probably sell between $2,900 to $4,000. I'm recommending we put it up like we have in the past through the papers with sealed bids for $3,500 to start. I drove the truck a couple different times. It is in decent shape. So I feel with the low miles and, its condition's pretty good, so.
Mr. Peroni, what are the miles on the truck?
I think 89,000 or something like that. I'd have to double check it. I'm sorry, I don't have the exact mileage here. It's around that, though.
Okay.
Are you looking for a minimum bid?
I'm just looking to get approval to put it out for bid to sell it. And if everybody's okay with that price range to start, then we'll go ahead and go for it. Ms. Tinnevery?
I'd like to move that we put the 2000 Ford Ranger up for bid through the newspapers and our website at a minimum bid of $3,500.
Support.
Okay, motion supported. Discussion? Okay, seeing none, could you call the roll, please?
Ms. Tinnevery?
Aye.
Mr. Clemens?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Mr. Frederick?
Aye.
Hirschberger votes aye. Mr. Peroni?
Aye, and the motion passed 7-0. Okay, item 8D, request for approval to reduce the minimum bid on the 2008 Ford Crown Victoria. The car we put out for bid twice, and we didn't have a single bid on it. We actually did have somebody walk in today interested in it. Did you talk to him at all? But we thought we'd lower the price $500 and see if we can get it to move for $1,000. It's sitting out in front right now. I definitely think it's worth $1,000. I think it's worth $1,500. I just think we're having a hard time finding somebody to bite on it. But so I look to lower it to $1,000 to get rid of it. Mr. Steiner?
I make a motion to reduce the minimum bid amount on the 2008 Crown Victoria. Did not sell previously with the minimum of 15, and again, reduce that to 1,000 minimum bid.
Okay.
Support.
Motion supported by Ms. Tinnevery. Discussion? Could you call the roll, please?
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Ms. Tinnevery?
Aye.
Mr. Frederick?
Aye.
Mr. Clemens?
Aye.
Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Hirschberger votes aye. Mr. Peroni?
Aye, and the motion passed 7-0. Number 9, comments from the public. Comments limited to 5 minutes for each individual. Come on up. Now you can
Logan
finish
Tisdale,
what yours-
1308 Brandywine Street. 2,000 years ago, a guy asked somebody, he said, I heard you're a king. And the guy replied, he said, I come to testify to the truth. Christ is the only truth there is. But you know what? I spent 23 years of my life looking for the truth. I already know who the truth is Lord Jesus Christ. But this is an attempt to find the truth out about what's going on with the Sheriff's Department. This is hours of work. This is what I did when I was a detective. I spent hours and hours looking for the truth. And that's what this board ought to be looking for, is the truth. What's the truth? I didn't come here to disparage deputy sheriffs, but I'm probably the most hated person in the Sheriff's Department right now. You know what my biggest fear is? That down the road here, everybody will slap everybody on the back and everybody will be happy and you'll sit around eating hot dogs around a campfire singing Kumbaya, and Logan will be the most hated person in Bedford Township, Monroe County. But you know what? I'd rather be the most hated person and stand up for the truth than to let things slide and nobody do anything about it. That's who I am. That's what I did for 23 years as a policeman. God ingrained that into me as a person. I don't always find it. And of course, you know, like everybody else, you know, I always tell kind of fibs too, you know, the fish was this big and I said it was that big. Well, what I'm saying here is there's a truth to this, and we need to come to the truth of this. And you as township trustees, your name says trustee. That means we need to trust that you're going to look for the truth. That's what it's about. Ask the questions. What are you doing? Why are we paying this extra money and we're not getting the services for it? That's a legitimate question. That's not asking too much. I'm a middle-aged taxpayer here.
Logan, I've got to, and stop this time, I got to ask you, though, we're doing that.
I know, but I'm saying that after a month, we still haven't got an answer. But the bottom line is, the simple question is, they should have that answer almost immediately. If there's no problem in what you're asking them, they should have the answers to those questions. And I'm just saying, I'm not blaming you for that. I'm saying that they should be answering those questions. And before I would pay a quarterly bill, I'd say, send the thing back. When you answer these questions, you'll get paid. Until then, we're not paying you, until you explain to us why we're doing this, why we're getting billed for hours that they're not working, why we're paying $60,000 extra a year. At least that's what it looks like on the accounts there, that we're paying $60 grand extra a year for services that we did not get that they say we got. That's ridiculous. And we're paying for other hours, $150,000. That'd put a pretty nice down payment on that truck that they're looking for the fire department. That's what we're talking about here. This is taxpayers' money. I saw you people quibble over $1,000. We're talking $60,000. And if that's only this year or 2017, what about the years prior to that? Maybe it could be as much as $300,000. That's a chunk of change. They pay for a third of that fire truck. So the bottom line is, all I'm asking you to do is, as trustees here, is to do your fiduciary duty and to find out what's going on. Then I'll keep my mouth shut, maybe. But I'm going to continue to quibble about the activity. If one officer can go out there, one officer on the Sheriff's Department went out there and he wrote a third of the tickets that were written in Bedford Township by himself. You know what? That guy ought to be Deputy of the Year. I'd vote for that guy in a heartbeat. So why are the other guys not doing anything? Why does it take 39 hours for one person to write one ticket? Come on, folks. You know, you say I always complain about activity. Traffic enforcement saves lives. 27 people lost their life in Monroe County. That is too many. There's a thing out there called, it's fighting to save lives. It's a thing, it's prepare to save lives or something like that. I can't remember now. Or toward zero deaths. That's what it is. TZD. And it's initiation by the federal government to reduce the number of traffic deaths in the United States. And that's what Michigan has adopted that. And you know what? Every time you go out there and you enforce the law, you make it possible for maybe somebody else to go home at night. Is that asking too much? If some guy can write 1/3 of the tickets by himself, well, what about the other people? Why are they not doing the work? Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Any more comments?
Good evening, Tim Janney, 3818 Consier Road, Lambertville, Michigan. I echo Mr. Tisdale, and he's been coming to these meetings two times a month for a long time, spewing all kinds of figures and facts about the Sheriff Department. And going back to the election of 2016, David Ewell was telling us the same thing. And I know you guys are working on it, but we're being taken advantage of. I mean, it's pretty plain and simple as far as I'm concerned. The other thing I want to say, please, this is not a personal remark, but this is a business remark. I'm disappointed in this board tonight. The chief came to you with a proposal for a wage of $50,000 for the captain. That is, he said was $6,000 over what the average is. And you gave him a raise before he even got the job. And I don't think that's a very, very good stewardship of the taxpayers' money. You know, I don't begrudge the guy. Good for him. But I think that's poor business. As a businessman, somebody comes to me for a job, the job pays this much. He goes to work for me for that, or he doesn't come to work for me. If he's that great, then I'd consider paying him more. But if he's starting out, he needs to earn the increases. And it seemed to me that the chief had that built into the plan. You guys did the same kind of thing with Chief Rudy. Before you hired him, he was here to be hired that night. I was here. You doubled his vacation. I just can't believe it. It's not good business.
Any more comments from the public?
Dale Track, 2842 Sanibel Lane. Well, Mr. Tisdale, I would not want him to take over the role of most hated. That's been my position for a long time. So I would ask the board, get Mr. Tisdale his answers, get the community the answers that he's seeking, and so we can see the difference of what we're actually looking at. So thank you.
For your comments. Any more comments from the public? Okay, seeing none. Board comments from township board members. Mr. Fredericks?
I would ask this board to invite Sue Soda to appear before us and to give her the kind of grateful speeches, if that's what we want to talk about, for her long effort as the director of the Ivor Lindsay facility. She is about to retire, and I've had the pleasure of working with her for a good number of years. I'm sure this board has, at various times, had an opportunity to work with her. She's done a fantastic job at Ivor Lindsay. And I'm sure you know, each of you, that when HUD does an audit, she has almost perfect credibility with the HUD auditors every time. She might have a nit or a nat there somewhere, but usually her audits are outstanding. I would think that we would like to have her over here in the public and give her our full support and our full congratulations for what she's done. Number two, this morning I sent to the supervisor an email, which I told him ahead of time. Where are we with the township budget? We still have quite a bit of time between now and the last meeting in June, but maybe you could give us some kind of an update as to where you are, where you propose to go forward, so that this doesn't come crashing down on one day and you have to bring in cots and a side of beef and a case of whiskey in order to get it done. Thank you.
Just to let you know, we're ahead of you on the Sioux Soda. Senator Zorn's coming here to do a proclamation April 17th, so we beat you to it, Lamar.
Good. Okay.
Sorry, man. Mr. Steiner?
Tell you what, Mr. Track, I'm gonna probably buy a hat and have 3 letters put on top, IMH, and you can pass it around to whoever you like. For I'm most hated. Dale, Logan, we don't hate you at all. We don't always agree, but I tell you what, many times we do agree, and I think that's the best part. As Mr. Francis's favorite saying, we don't always agree, but we can agree to disagree. So with that said, though, I do want to say I had a couple of calls this week. Unfortunately, I was not at the last meeting. I had some work travels that took me out of town. A couple of the calls that I got said the meeting got a little contentious. They said overall they think this board is doing a wonderful job, but they want us to make sure that we stick to what we all said we would do, is have civil conversations. I don't know who was all involved in the conversations because I haven't had a chance to rewatch it, but I just bring it back up to the board because I have had a couple of those calls. And you know, anything, you know, sometimes everybody, we get passionate about what we have to say, and sometimes we probably overstep and get a little bit anxious with our comments. So just something to think about because people are watching that and see that. Another thing Mr. Track said, something not being a Republican or Democrat issue. I would have a hard time finding anything on this board that really is a Democrat or Republican issue. And I myself, and I think I can speak for the entire board, but you guys correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think any one of you are here thinking as a Republican or Democrat issue. I think you're all here thinking this is for the community. And I would have to say we have to applaud everybody for that. Fire Chief, Mr. Massengel, once again, thank you for your first year. Excellent job. And as I told you right after you started, no pun intended, but you were indoctrinated by fire. You know, you were here, what, a week and a half when the church burned down? Unbelievable that, you know, that would happen that way. But again, you took charge and took the reins and didn't blink twice, as far as I can see. Fire truck, again, I was not here last week, or 2 weeks ago, but I too would have voted with this board. It would have been a unanimous vote of 7-0. It's a very important piece of equipment. The current ladder truck was still under repair as of this past weekend. It may be back in service now, but again, very important piece of equipment that, you know, I've talked to the chief in explaining why do we need a big ladder truck. And it didn't take long to understand why we need a ladder truck. There's a lot of things that can be done and fought from an aerial view on fires. You don't realize that when your house is, a lot of these houses are at least 35 feet from the road. To get up above that house to fight a fire, it's amazing that that truck can get just so close. So again, that's a good reason that we're moving forward with this truck. So other than that, the insurance, again, thanks to Representative Shepard, that's something that I think we all hope to look forward to, is the insurance. I think everybody's looking to save a dollar anywhere we can in our pocketbook. So kudos to Mr. Shepard and whoever he's got in support working that bill. That's all.
Okay, Ms. Tenenberry?
With regard to the salary for the fire inspector, I don't mean to dispute Mr. Massengel's survey, but I did get online to find out what fire inspectors are paid, and I didn't find any fire inspector near the $34,000 mark. I didn't see the criteria that he used. I didn't see, you know, what kind of information he put in there. But from California to New York, fire inspectors are paid a lot more than we're paying this one. And in my opinion, someone who has dedicated their life, been on the fire department for 20-plus years, put in their time in going out in the middle of the night and will continue to do that, something that the current fire marshal doesn't do, and he's not going to get paid extra for that. Like other people get paid for going on runs, he will get his salary. So in my opinion, you pay a person for their value as well as the fact that you need them, they're putting extra value into it. So I don't have any qualms about the $55,000 salary because I think that you have to go beyond just a national average and pay the person what they're worth. And I understand that going at 50, starting at 50 and raising it later, but this board has a tendency to forget things that are on the agenda. Once it gets off the agenda, never gets back again. So my concern was that. And then I would like to, I totally agree with Mr. Tisdale. And I would like to ask that it be a report from whatever this committee is. You, Mr. Peroni, you said we're doing that. I don't know we're doing that. I'm a trustee. I'm an equal board member. I have no idea what you're talking about, what you're doing, or what you've done. I would like to see a report on the next agenda for whatever you're doing. I would like to know publicly, and the people deserve a right to know publicly, what it is you're doing.
Okay.
Thank you.
Trustee comments?
I would echo the comments that the board's already made. And Mr. Track, you were gracious enough to commend the board for representation on the House bill with State Rep Shepherd, but actually that was your idea last meeting that this board do that. So where I always talk about citizen participation and being involved, thank you. It was a good recommendation, and we do support that bill. That's all I have for the good of the board.
Okay. Mr. Francis?
Excuse me. Well, a couple of things come to mind. One is to respond a little bit to Mr. Tisdale's comments on getting answers from the Monroe County Sheriff's Department. A list of questions, and there's got to be 20 of them at least, was transmitted to them last month, seeking answers to help us understand what their interpretation of our contract is and versus what our interpretation is. We're not accusing them of anything. We just don't understand how they interpret it. When we get those answers back so we know how they interpret it, then we set up, in my opinion, we ought to set up a meeting with them to resolve those issues, because there are some questions in maybe all of our minds. I was serving on a little ad hoc committee to work on those questions. They're confusing. Contracts are up for interpretation, and that contract in basic form has been around for 20-some years, 25 years. Never hurts to review. Nancy's word, never hurts to review contract. I agree 100%. What we're trying to do is get some clarification on what it says and compare it to what we think it says, and then we can move on. So that's in process, hopefully be done. Second issue is supervisor suggested we give a little update of where we are in the budget process for next year. The Finance Committee has been working on that. We've had several meetings. We're not quite done. We're about done with the general fund, but we need to look at the other funds and then, I guess, set up a series of probably committee of the whole meetings to talk just the budget for the board, maybe 2 or 3, however many we need, way in advance of when we need to approve the budget, which would be in June. So we're on target to do that. The other thing that we might want to say is some of us on the board, well, all of us received a memo projecting that if we continue spending more than we're taking in, we're going to run out of money. Yeah, we knew that. We agreed a few years back to spend down our fund balance by spending more each year than we take in to fix the roads. We've spent a lot of money in the last few years on roads. In my opinion, this next year, 2018-19, will probably be the last year where we'll spend more than we take in. But if we are successful in convincing the board to maybe bond a group of projects like we've talked about before, we're not ready to present that, but that idea could cost us about $300,000 a year to fund that bond. We can pay for that on a reduced budget for roads and still get the job done that we all think needs to be done, which is fix those northern roads that haven't been touched for 40 years. We're working on that. I think if we make some budget adjustments to the year's budget that we're in right now, plus downsize some of them in our projections in the early preliminary budgets for next year, we'll be able to accomplish that, and we will not run into deficits. So I see some progress there, and I think it's meaningful. We're not ready to present it to the board, but it's coming. It's going to be soon. I think that's all I got.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Hirschberger?
A couple things here. As you know, I was to institute for clerks all last week, and some of the things that we went over in a nutshell, I'll just give bullet points here. Changes in communities we serve, financing local government services in changing times, free is best. Effective meeting techniques, we learned a program called Trello to keep track of things. It's something the board could even use. I've implemented it in the clerk's department so that we can keep track of things. It's kind of like what Mr. Steiner said, where you start a project, it's in work mode, it's completed. So we put that on our computers and we're using that. Understanding yourself and others, election updates, implementing the new election equipment, which most of you who voted in this last election have used. Community education through media and community, which we have the community, or the committee with media, and so we're working on that. Strategic planning process for clerk's office, how to become a superior communicator, great presentation. Presentation skills, accountability at the workplace, and tactical planning. One of the issues that we also talked about were complete streets. And believe it or not, I was only one of 5 out of 155 representative of clerks in the state to say I knew what complete streets even were. And that we were working in Bedford, our master plan, to get complete streets or connectivity. So that was interesting to see. On another note, the Communication Media Committee met yesterday, and we're brainstorming, working on the video for Bedford, one that would not only try to bring new families in, but also businesses, industrial, commercial. So we're brainstorming on how to get that video completed and what needs to be in there and how long it should be. And then just last, I just want to wish my mom a happy birthday. She just turned 88. So happy birthday, Mom.
Okay. Well, it's been a very busy couple of weeks. I'm going to highlight a few things that I think is pretty cool that's going on. Bike Month. Bedford is trying to host a bike ride for Bike Month, which is going to be in May in conjunction with Luna Pier and Toledo. Team McCog is also involved with this planning and is offering financial support. In the financial support, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe this would be probably one of the first times we would see this, but they're not giving us money. They're creating the flyer. They're creating shirts and giving us up to 100 shirts. They're going to be posting it in all the newspapers in Toledo. So look at it however you want. We're getting dollars out of Team McCog in that relationship. And I look for it to be a great bike event. They're into quite a few meetings with Team McCog. Team McCog was here today with Al. Al's a passionate bike rider. You can see him riding around Temperance, pretty much every day of the week. But he's behind this. He's working very hard. And I just want to give a shout out to Al if he is watching. That guy, man, he works a lot of extra hours. He's in evening meetings constantly, and I just want to say I really appreciate it because a lot of these initiatives, they start from Al. And a lot of people feel comfortable coming in the office and sharing ideas, and that's where a lot of the stuff happens. And this is one of them. So if you're interested in working in the event, just call Al at the office. Light It Up Blue for autism. We have a limited supply of donated light bulbs for free in the supervisor's office. Light It Up Blue in Bedford is headed up by Jim Nyhan, and if you can contact him for more information, you're going to want to turn on your light bulbs. I believe it's April 2nd. Maybe it's April 1st. I could be wrong on that. It says April 1st, but I'm kind of disagreeing with it, so we'll go with April 1st. But and it ends April 30th. But that's a really cool event. I believe, we need to support that however we can. So I wanted to talk about the trade fair a little bit. I was at the trade fair all weekend, for pretty much the full time. I did dip out on Sunday about 20 minutes early, but I was able to hand out over probably 300 business cards and talk to probably at least a couple hundred different people about issues and about what we're doing with roads and our, just what we have going on. So it was a huge benefit for me personally being at the trade fair. And we had our ordinance department there all weekend, and they answered questions honestly all weekend as well, because people have a lot of questions about ordinance. And a lot of times when somebody's not there, you don't usually get your answers. So it was a huge success for them. Also, they handed out the new pamphlets they have. I think they handed out a couple hundred of the new pamphlets, the new ordinance, just quick and easy guides. I attended the Veterans Center grand opening, and again, the oldest veteran, Ed Crowell, at age 100, the World War II vet, was there in attendance, Navy veteran, and I just want to thank all the veterans for the service and who attended the grand opening. It was a huge success. I think there was over 400 people there. It was standing room only, so. I had a pretty cool opportunity today to talk to 3rd and 4th graders for, I had 5 different sessions on Career Day at Jackman Road, and so we did little mini ribbon cuttings there, and it was a lot of fun. And I was able to talk to the Weeblos Boy Scouts about what we do here at the Government Center. So a lot of stuff going on. So if anybody else has any questions or like talk after the meeting, I'm always available. So if no further questions, we stand. Ms. Tinder?
I would just like to applaud Trudy for going to the training for certified municipal clerk. The clerk is the toughest job in the township, has the most work to do, and a trained clerk is invaluable to the residents. And so I appreciate you going, Trudy.
Thank you.
For the benefit of Bedford Township and having a staff that can fill in while you're gone.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't it so nice getting along here? I'm just so proud of this board. My gosh. My gosh. Okay, if no further. And Logan, I will tell you, we are working on it. And with Mr. Francis, I hope you got a good enough update with the finance. But we are working.
I'm ready anytime.
We're working diligently every week with the finance committee, and I tell you what, we are crunching. I don't want to give out hard numbers, but we're over the 200,000 mark already with a lot of what we've done. So, and we're going to keep going. So we're working hard, and I tell you, I love having this guy on the committees with me.
You do?
So he brings a lot of expertise, and so I appreciate it. So we stand adjourned.